Greetings, everyone. My name is Abel Makamadze. I'm a student at Osiri University, enrolled on the MBA in Sustainable Leadership. And in this clip, I'm going to share with you the key insights from my capstone integration project titled Ubuntu Mind in Action, a personal and professional reflection. And the whole idea is to weave together the concepts that were learned in the course and demonstrate how they apply to self, and they also apply in my personal life and in my life in community with others. How do they contribute towards human flourishing? So it's going to be a four-part a presentation, of course, just capturing the key insights. The first part, I'm going to share with you my personal philosophy and how this has integrated into the Ubuntu mind, and how the Ubuntu mind itself has transformed my worldview. So my personal philosophy starts with a simple but powerful observation of our current times. And I know we describe our times in different ways, but for me, I agree with what Otto Schama said some years back, that we are living in a time of real disruption. And this disruption is seen in the way that we relate with nature, in the way that we relate with one another within our social circles, and also the way that we react to what happens in our moments. So these reactions show that this time of disruption is characterized by three disconnects, or fragmentations, or separations. And Otto Schama called this the ecological disconnect, the disconnect between people and nature. We treat nature as though it's not part of life-giving, interdependent unity. We do a lot of violence to nature, degradation, erosion, pollution, and all sorts of environmental violations. That shows this disconnect between us and nature. And then within the social circles, there's a lot of friction, there's a lot of mistrust, there's a lot of conflicts between people and between groups. And then the spiritual or the source disconnect shows up in the way that we react, and the way that we react shows that there's a disconnect between these reactions and our deeper sources of awareness, from which creative and ethical behavior comes from. And so my philosophy builds on this. Because of these disconnects, we have collectively, or we are, as Otto Schama says, we are collectively creating results that nobody wants. And for me, I say, if we can collectively create results that nobody wants, we can also collectively create results that everybody wants. And this is where the evolutionary psychology comes in, and the concepts of consciousness and knowledge comes in. Evolutionary psychology gives us insight into why the social disconnect happens so easily. As Shipping Tang explains, our brains are wired to detect or to spot threats quickly. And while they do that, they can easily miss quiet signals of goodwill or good intentions, the benign intentions. And this natural tendency, this evolutionary tendency, which worked for our ancestors in their times, but in this complex, in this modern world, in the complex situations that we face sometimes, this tendency to detect threats makes it more difficult to build trust, even when trust and cooperation is beneficial for all. But the hopeful part is, and this is really one of the favorite ideas from the course, is from Erwin Schrödinger. Please forgive my pronunciation of the name. I might have butchered it. He reminds us that we are both sculptor and sculpture. We are shaped and we also shape. We are shaped by our past, by our environment, and by our systems. And yet we have the capacity and the agency to consciously shape ourselves and the world around us. So we are not at the mercy of the past, but we also have the agency to shift and change and shape ourselves. So consciousness, it begins with consciousness, because consciousness then allows us to pause and notice our patterns. What are the patterns? How do we react? How do we act? And when we notice, this is where knowledge comes in, and knowledge actually comes in two forms. There is explicit knowledge, which comes in terms of codified data, codified information, and then there is tacit knowledge, which is not quantifiable, but it comes in terms of intuition, relational intuition, emotional intelligence, And when we bring together the social awareness, the awareness that comes as a part of consciousness, and the tacit knowledge, we can start healing the disconnects rather than reinforcing them. And running through all this is the Ubuntu, the wisdom that says I am because we are. Ubuntu teaches us that we are not isolated individuals, but part of a rich web of relationships. In my 2024 journal article titled Returning to the Village Concept, a panacea for drug and substance abuse scourge, I showed how this Ubuntu mindset, this philosophy, helps us address big challenges by looking at the system, by looking at the family, by looking at the community and the structures underneath our communities, rather than pointing fingers at individuals. It's a systemic scourge and not an individual problem. And for me, this is how Ubuntu has affected my philosophy, that as long as we act from an ecosystem awareness, from an ecosystem awareness, the disconnect is going to grow further and further until we reach even a point of rupture. But if we can move from ecosystem to ecosystem awareness, and this is where Ubuntu comes in, then we can heal our times, we can redeem our times, and live by the values of empathy, ethical responsibility, cooperation, and the deep desire for all to flourish together. And then part two, application into my professional life. I just want to point an example. I've written a lot in the project, but a practical example: when I moved from Zimbabwe with my family and migrated to Eastern Europe and became a pastor in an international church. This church had been without a substantive pastor for 5 years, but there was a core leadership team that held the ship together. They did a great job to keep the church moving. And also, secondly, it was the first time that this church was serving not just an African pastor, but a black pastor for almost 30 years of its history. And so I'm coming into this territory which is full of uncertainties. What is going to happen? What is going to change? And how is it going to change? I could have behaved in ways that further put a gap between me and the leadership team and the church. But this is where the concepts of evolutionary psychology became very handy and in a very practical way. Evolutionary psychology helped me to understand how naturally alert we are all of us to potential threats, and sometimes how we easily miss the good intentions. Remember the shipping tongue, malign and benign intentions. So we have heightened awareness to malign intentions, and very slow when it comes to grasping and appreciating benign intentions. So, drawing from shipping tongue's insights on the asymmetry between threat and goodwill, I focused on building trust step by step through shared decision making, open conversations, and clear, transparent communication. These small but consistent efforts helped us to grow a stronger collective ownership, with the team gradually stepping forward together into the future. Leadership was no longer trying to hold on and preserve the old structures, but it became a courageous stepping forth into the future, though with its uncertainties. And in those moments of uncertainty, becoming intentionally aware of benign intentions. Then the third part moves to implementation, really, because how do I implement what I've learned from the course in a personal way so that it brings personal improvement? The first thing that I do is to manage how I conduct myself upon waking up, and I want to optimize the first 60 to 90 minutes after waking up. And this has been influenced by neuroscience, which says what we do in that period, 60 to 90 minutes, can make or break your day in terms of cognition and mental alertness and productivity. And Dr. Patricia Schmidt has given 5 things that you should avoid in the morning, things that destroy your brain. You need to delay or to avoid looking at your phone and checking messages the first thing upon waking up. You also need to expose yourself to natural sunlight, the morning light, of course, if it is not winter. And then you also need to avoid just jumping into demanding tasks, like mentally demanding tasks, without recollecting yourself and calming yourself down. You also need to avoid eating sugary breakfast. So you eat a balanced low glycemic breakfast, and also make sure that you are hydrated. So it's advisable to take water in the morning. And I do those things. This is the plan that I have upon waking up. And then each week I select from our virtual cycle that we did in class, I select one virtue to intentionally practice during the week, and I maintain a structured journal to notice my reactions, the fear-driven, trust-building, or cooperative opportunities. And at the end of the day, following Socrates' maxim, an examined life is not worth living, I do an examination of conscience, and I look at basically 3 questions. What did I do right? What did I do wrong? And what can I do better tomorrow? And professionally, I also operationalize Ubuntu by cultivating systems awareness and relationship leadership, focusing on clear roles and responsibility, transparent communication channels, and in embedding interdependencies in decision making. Monthly leadership meetings begin with gratitude exercises. What are you grateful for in your personal life and in your leadership life? And you pick one person or 2 people from the leadership team, share with them what you appreciate about them. All these things help to build a team that trusts each other. And then part 4, we move to contribution strategy, how am I going to contribute for collective learning and social transformation? It begins with me consistently embodying the Ubuntu mind, relational interdependence, shared responsibility, and collective well-being. It's me. People have to see what it means to be a Ubuntu-minded person, not through what I say, but through the behavior that I model. By modeling empathy, ethical action, and cooperation in my family first, and then in my professional life and in my community, I I will be generating positive ripple effects that strengthen relational competence. Through effective use of self, I will also consciously leverage my presence and my values and relational capacities combined with the scout mindset. And this approach helps identify deeper systemic patterns and respond thoughtfully. And drawing on Otto Scharmer's, what he recently wrote in terms of looking at what is happening in the world, he says we have to begin to influence each other in whatever way we can to move from asking the question, what is happening and who is to blame, to what is being born and what is required of us. And lastly, in the interest of time, I just want to say, at the end of the day, the Ubuntu mind in action teaches us that leadership is both a personal adventure and a shared responsibility, full of real potential to transform lives, organizations, and society for the better. Thank you for watching this. I would love to hear your thoughts and reflections. How might the Ubuntu mind show up in your own life and leadership? Let's keep the conversation going, and I sign out. Thank you.